the big company. So if they can see your face, then you're making yourself more relatable. So you know your target audience. If you don't know them, keep digging, keep doing research. And another thing that I'll just confirm is the testing. Testing is very key. If you don't have a bunch of money to test, then you can do it slowly. But you do have to test. Like what we're saying is just what we've seen. And something specific might work differently for you in your niche genre. And you're going to be the one that figures that out. But you do just have to test it. So if you don't have $100 a day, you know, like we were saying, start with $5 or start with $10, but you just have to start somewhere. So Gabe, very, very key on those tips there. But let's work our way backwards a little bit. Sure. Like we know your numbers now that you guys are killing it. You're working full-time in the music business, but it all had to start somewhere, right? So walk us through a bit of your story. What first got you started with music and how'd you work your way up to where you are now?
Yeah, for sure. So for me, you know, I first started out, I was lucky enough that my dad was interested enough in music. It wasn't what he did for a living, but he had a little recording studio when I was in high school. And so that kind of sparked my interest, and I started making beats and kind of got into it. And I remember I had some friends over, you know, we used to mess around. And I remember the day that I was like, all right, I'm tired. Let's wrap this up. That somebody was like, hey, I'll pay you if we can keep recording. And I was like, what? You know, like you'll pay me for this? And that was kind of the thing that sort of kicked off even the idea that I could make a living in music. And then it kind of went from there. And so I started out, you know, mainly as a producer. And that's what I wanted to do, is I wanted to make beats and sell beats. That's what I like to do. And for me, I kind of started a little bit the old school way, where I started interning at a couple recording studios. I interned for a guy named Narda Michael Walden, who is a producer who is very, very successful, especially back in the 80s and 90s. He's got a few Grammys. He worked with, you know, Whitney Houston, Mariah Carey, Aretha Franklin, sort of a who's who of R&B and pop from back in the 80s and 90s. And so I was really lucky that I literally just, this is how old this was. I looked up in the phone book what recording studios were in the area, and his studio happened to be in the area. And I just went there and worked for free and interned. And that's where I really learned about engineering. And engineering is something that's been really helpful for me. Even though I've always mostly thought of myself as a producer, being able to engineer, being able to record and mix and master has been a skill that's kind of floated me throughout the years, where maybe I've had more lean years where I'm not making so much money as a producer, but I've been consistently been able to both make money as an engineer, and it's also really opened up doors. It's something where it's much easier to get in the room with an artist as an engineer than it is as a producer. And by the way, a little side note on that, if you're a producer and you're trying to get placements with an artist, the best person that you want to make friends with is not the A&R. Sometimes it's not even really the artist, it's the engineer, because the engineer is the dude who's going to be playing the beats that they're going to be writing to and picking. So that's, anyways, a little side note there, but it gives you access if you're an engineer. So that's been super helpful for me. And so I opened up a brick and mortar studio and was doing engineering and producing and doing it the old school way, doing it, you know, not online for over 10 years. Work with some big artists and stuff, especially in the Bay Area here where I'm from. But was actually not making very much money at all, like was pretty much broke. Even with songs that, you know, got on the radio and TV and film and stuff like that, still was broke. And so I made the shift about 5 years ago of, well, let me try selling beats online. And that sort of opened up a whole nother world where I started learning about what we're talking about here today, about marketing and entrepreneurship and just being a business owner. And it turns out, even though I kind of came to it late in life, that I really like this stuff. And so because of that, I really dove into it and learned what other industries were doing as far as their marketing and advertising and branding, and then was able to kind of apply some of that to producing. And there's a lot of stuff that people weren't doing as producers that people were doing in other industries. And I got to give a shout out to Anno Domini, who's a producer, who's like one of the first guys to show me some different ways of doing this kind of stuff, including like using sales funnels and these new techniques. And because I was applying these new techniques, it allowed me to kind of jump up the ranks pretty quickly to be, one of the better selling producers online. And it really was not that I invented anything new. It was more just applying the principles from these different industries to selling beats online. And that's kind of what's helped get me to where I am today.
Got you. So even hearing that, like, at what point? So when you were broke, or are you saying you were kind of broke, maybe broke?
Oh yeah, no, I was broke. I was lucky enough that I lived at my dad's house and he let me live there. So, but I was broke.
Got you. So were you still doing music full time at that point, or at what point did you switch over from doing a day job into just doing music full time? Like, what income level was that? Or was it just you were able to stay at your dad's house so you didn't have many bills, therefore you could kind of have some leniency with this?
Yeah, it was more the second thing. I did try other jobs. I tried being a personal trainer and, had odd jobs here and there, but I was, able to focus on music even at times when it wasn't really bringing the money. Cause like you said, my dad let me stay with him. So it really wasn't like there was a shift where, I finally made enough money that I could quit my day job. I was kind of just, floating along, and then finally made enough money that, now I can actually pay my own bills. And, so it was more that kind of shift. And that really happened once I made the shift to building my own brand, to working, online and selling beats online. Then I was like, okay, cool. Now I'm making enough money that I can actually support myself. I can, hire employees. I can, all this kind of stuff started happening. And that's really just in the last 4 or 5 years.
Okay. So in the 4 or 5 years, what's the one thing that you say of all your product lines? And if it's not one thing, you can say it's a mix, but which one of those has been the most crucial in growing your revenue stream and scaling? Like, which one idea was it that, like, okay, this one is really it, and this has really helped create a trickle down effect for the rest of the products? Or is it a steady growth of all of them?
Yeah, I'd say it's a combination. I'd say there's a concept that definitely was the biggest thing. And the concept was sort of what we touched on earlier, which was not just selling beats, because that's sort of what most of the people in my niche had been doing, and a lot still are. Instead, focusing on, hey, cool, so I can sell beats and that's great, but what else can I do for my customer? What's a higher level of value that I can provide to them? What are some different problems I can solve? And then how can I bundle that together? And so that took on the form of a couple of different things. It took on the form of my membership, which is huge because that was recurring revenue. And it took on the form of, selling beats, but selling them in a package where it includes other things. It includes, whether if it's promotion or mixing and mastering, or even some information products of teaching them about, various things. So it's more that concept, I think, of bundling products and services more than anything. And then those two things, which is the membership itself, which did that, and then sort of these packages or one-off bundles that did that as well.
Got you. Okay, so you were talking about your team a little bit earlier too. How many people work on your team, and at what stages did you see yourself hiring them? And like, what functions do they do now? How does that contribute to your growth? Like, I want to get people around the concept of your team and what they can do to really grow together.
Yeah. I mean, so I'll say, there's no way I would be accomplishing what I was without my team. So important. There's only so much you can do alone. And I always like to give a word of caution, because I feel like it can be an excuse where I hear people say, well, if I just had the right team, I'd be where I want to be, or man, I'm just waiting for a manager, or if I just had somebody to run all my social media, or if I just had this, or if I just had this person. And to me, that's the wrong way to think about it. The way that I've always thought about growing my team is that I get to a point where I have a need that I could no longer fill, and then I hire. So like, what I mean is like, okay, so yeah, sure, I'd like to just hire somebody. If I just tried to hire somebody to run Facebook ads, if I were to try to hire somebody who's as good at running Facebook ads as I am now, it would be very, very expensive. But what I did instead was I learned about Facebook ads, right? And then, now I've gotten to a point where now I can hire somebody to help with certain parts of it. But I figured out the system first, and then I hired somebody to do it. Same thing, and that's even a more advanced thing. I mean, even just something like answering emails. That's something where, okay, well, at first I was answering all the emails, and then eventually it was like, man, there's too much here that, first of all, eventually it was like, well, no one person could even do this, even if it's their full-time job, is kind of where we're at now. But even it's like, well, if I just do this, I'm not going to have time to do anything else. And so I didn't hire until I got to that point. And then once I got to that point, this is something that was super key. This was something that my girlfriend Louisa taught me, which was that you can't just hire somebody and be like, here's what I'm doing, figure it out. You have to have standard operating procedures, which is some kind of formalized system of how to do the job, right? So like, you have to tell your team how they can win, meaning like, if it's answering emails, the job description can't be answer emails. It's got to be like, if this type of email comes in, this is the list of answers. This is how you reply. If this is how they reply, this is how you reply. Like, you got to get pretty detailed. You have to organize this stuff. And that can sound intimidating. That could be as simple as creating a little like screen share video where you just show how you do it. But some kind of, for me, the format has always been, let me figure out how to do this thing. Now we're so busy that I can no longer fill the role, but I'm going to teach somebody else how to do it, as opposed to, oh man, if only I had somebody filling this role, then we could grow to the point of where I could hire them. Does that make sense? Am I explaining that well?
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's kind of what we do here, which I'm still stretched thin, and I'm sure you can relate to that. But there's always a need, and then I'll find like I'm doing it too much, and it's just taking away too much time from the other things. So I'd say that's about the same thing we do. Cool, man. Well, yeah. So we went back, but let's go forward now. Let's talk about the future. What marketing plans are you guys going to be implementing within the next year, 6 months, 3 months? Like, what do you guys think you're going to be doing next? And like, where are you trying to go to? Are you trying to make any other plans, like grow a label? Like, where are you guys heading?
So the biggest thing that we've added recently is this is basically a whole nother almost business, a whole nother part of the business for sure, which is teaching other producers how to grow and scale their own businesses. So for me, I've been doing this online game now for about 4 or 5 years. And what I've heard over and over from marketers and people is like, selling information is the way to go. Like, that's how you really become successful. So meaning like selling courses and, information in different formats. And so for me, it's actually very recent that I sort of got into the information business. And I have to say, I love it. Like, for me, I love teaching, and the results that the producers have been getting from this course that, I teamed up. I mentioned Anno Domini earlier. We teamed up together and created a course for producers, teaching them, how to make money selling beats, essentially. And so for me, that's been super fun. Like, I love geeking out about this stuff. I love learning about this stuff, and I really love teaching it as well. And now seeing like the results that my students are getting is like super cool. It's like a whole nother level. It's a different, it's the next step in the progression, right? It's like, cool, I've been able to accomplish this. That's really cool. The next level is like, can I help other people accomplish this? So that's definitely has been, for the last few months, a big focus, and certainly is going to continue to be a really big focus as well. So that's one thing for sure. And then on the artist side, just continue to grow it, continue to make that membership better and to get more people into that membership. And so those are the two focuses, really, that course for producers and then my membership for artists, for rappers and singers.
Cool. Yeah. I've noticed when selling information, are you guys going to just employ the same marketing tactics that you're doing with the other stuff? Or are you going to try anything new?
So no, that's a good question. It's actually completely different. So our sales process for, our advertising and sales process for what we've been selling for artists has been usually some version of like an ad that gets them in for a free or super low ticket item. So either like, as a producer, a great way to get people onto your email list or whatever is offer them some free beat leases, right? It's like the perfect, they call it a lead magnet, the thing that's going to get people to opt in.